It's a little bit unclear. So these WeChat public accounts, you can't just randomly set one up if you're an Australian politician. It's very protected in China. It has to be a Chinese national who registers these public accounts. So Australian politicians, including the Prime Minister, they tend to get these Chinese companies that act as intermediaries to find some random person in China to legally register the account, and then they actually set it all up. And they're the ones technically who control it. Now, it's usually a business arrangement. So Scott Morrison has had this WeChat account for 2 years. And it was in early January this year when suddenly followers of this account got a message saying that they're being transferred over to a new account, which was like a lifestyle account focusing on Chinese in Australia. It had nothing to do with the Prime Minister or politics. So a few things could have happened. Tencent, the Chinese company that runs WeChat, has responded to all this and says, as far as it's concerned, this looks like a dispute about account ownership. And the company says nothing nefarious has happened. They're looking into it and they will resolve it according to their rules. It doesn't sound like they're going to restore it to Scott Morrison's ownership. So there could have been some sort of business dispute, a falling out, a misunderstanding. But you can't 100% rule out that also, too, being China, with everything being quite tightly controlled, that there could have been some sort of order or something from the Cyberspace Administration to shut it down. It's just to jump to that conclusion, like some of the politicians in the coalition were doing today, seems a bit of a stretch when there doesn't appear to be solid evidence of that.
And if it's been running for 2 years, has the government been using it as a way of communicating its message to Chinese people?
Yeah, because there are many first-generation Chinese migrants in Australia who, if they don't have permanent residency, many have obtained Australian citizenship. Therefore, they vote. Therefore, politicians of all parties want to connect with them. And if they are first-generation migrants, Mandarin's their mother tongue, it's quite likely that they're using WeChat to get their news and information about Australia more than they are other social media outlets, or they might be using a mix. So you can understand why the politicians for quite some time now have been setting up WeChat accounts to try and reach the Chinese audiences. The big problem with WeChat is because it is controlled and ultimately censored by a foreign political party, which in recent years has really been quite hostile towards Australia, you have situations like we saw last year when the trade dispute between Australia and China was really heating up. We had that Chinese government spokesman who tweeted out a picture, a doctored image of an Australian soldier threatening an Afghan child. And Scott Morrison got on his WeChat in Chinese, not him, but he got someone to translate it, and tried to give Chinese speakers in Australia his version of events, and the Chinese government comes along and just pulls the plug and censors that particular post. So I think many people who look at China and cyber issues have long thought that there are very deep problems with politicians using this app. And it looks like many in the coalition now are calling for a boycott, saying they won't use it as a result of what we've seen recently.
But to that point, if there is some form of bipartisan boycott, that would then not really would it achieve much? And then would it cut off that avenue of trying to speak to the Chinese diaspora?
Well, I've seen that some of the discussion from coalition figures, there does appear to be a sort of domestic political element to it, because they're saying that, for example, the Labor leader, Anthony Albanese's WeChat is still up and running. So there's obviously a little bit of back and forth domestically. But long term, you do have this issue that if the Chinese government, through its censorship apparatus, wanted to interfere in an Australian election, it would be quite useful to target electorates in Melbourne and Sydney that have large Chinese diaspora. You could quite effectively censor some of the posts from particular politicians. We've already seen the Prime Minister in the past censored when he tried to say something which wasn't to the Chinese government's liking. So long term, this actually is an issue. And one of the most interesting things we saw today, Bev, is the member for Chisholm, Gladys Leo, who is part of the coalition. She said that she will stop using WeChat until the company responsible explains what's going on. And this is really significant because her seat, Chisholm, does have a large Chinese population. It is exactly the type of election battleground where candidates would use WeChat usually to try and reach those voters.
So, as you said, there was this assumption that perhaps the Chinese government was behind this shift in the Prime Minister's account. Have they said anything?
Well, I'll just quickly say that's what some on the government are saying, but there are others who are casting doubt on that. Thus far, no, we've just seen a little bit of sort of small blogs on the Chinese internet that have been translating news from Australia, but we're yet to see a formal statement or response from the Chinese government. And frankly, Bev, on an issue like this, I wouldn't necessarily expect one.
Exactly. Bill, good to talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.